we changed things up a little bit because we don't want to get stuck in a rut and just like you expected Clayton, the nice bearded man, to come up here, and then it was like, oh wait, it's Brian. I don't know what's going on anymore. So just like to try to change things on you from time to time. Welcome to Restoration Church. We are so glad that you're here, whether you're here in the brewery with us or you're watching online. We're just grateful that you're here. It's a pretty good time here at Restoration Church. We get to have church in a brewery, and we like to do that because, well, it's a brewery, so we have fun there. So wanted to just welcome you today. We are starting the second part of our Genesis series today. It is called Promises. It's right there on the screen if you can see it. This new series we're calling Promises. Now we're still in Genesis. We're just starting a new part of Genesis. So we've gone through chapters 1 through 11 already, and we called that series That Escalated Quickly. Now that isn't entirely true. It didn't really escalate that quickly because Genesis 1 through 11 actually covers more than 2,000 years of time. So to say that it escalated quickly, it seems like it does because it's just 11 chapters. It's pretty quick. So it covers over 2,000 years, and it also has about 19 generations are listed in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. So it covers a whole lot of ground from Genesis 1 to 11. So if you're like a runner of some kind, anybody run in here? A couple of people do, not very many. I don't run, but I know I've tried to run before. I've got really flat feet, and it just hurts, and I'm not very good at it. And I'm not a runner. I'm not built to run. I don't know if I was in a prehistoric time, I would just get eaten by a dinosaur because I wouldn't be able to run away. I would try to make a joke at the dinosaur, and he wouldn't understand. He would just eat me. So I'm not very good at running, but my son Carson runs track this year, and he's getting pretty good at it. The interesting thing about running, especially if you're a long-distance runner, is you've got that first 10 minutes. Like, I'll try to run, and it won't be 10 minutes, it'll be about 3 minutes. The first 3 minutes, I feel great. Like, I feel like I've got a good pace, I'm doing whatever, and then inevitably, I slow down, and I'm basically going on a weird, jog walk. And it doesn't look good, which is why we do it out in the woods where no one can see me, if I ever do it. So we have this slow, you get winded after about 3 minutes, and then it's like, well, okay, that was fun. Time to do something else. All that to say, Genesis 1 through 11 was more like the first part of the run, and then we're getting to the second part of the run where you're like, whoa, I'm winded, I better slow down. So now we've got Abram, who's we're later going to know is Abraham, but we're going to be in Genesis 12 through 25. Not all today. We're not going to cover 13 chapters today, don't worry. But we're doing chapter 12 today, but this series of promises is going to be 13 chapters, and it studies the life of Abraham. Just one guy. We see the life of Abraham for the next 13 weeks. Abram right now. We're going to get to Abraham in a second. And by second, I mean 6 weeks. But time's not good for a preacher. It's I don't know. Well, we don't understand time. We can just, that's why we have clocks. So we have Genesis 12 today. We're going to be doing Abram. A third of Genesis, 1/3 of Genesis is dedicated to this guy, Abram/Abraham, which is a lot of Genesis. So we've got 2,000 chapters, 2,000 years in 11 chapters. Oh, it's Sunday morning. I need more coffee. And then we've got 12 through 25, which is going to be just a couple hundred years, it seems like, with our man Abram. So that's what we're doing. Abram is a pretty important character in the Bible. He's a pretty important guy. If you don't know that already, we have songs dedicated to Abraham. We talked about it last week. I'm kind of disappointed we didn't sing it this week, but we've got 13 more weeks to try to sing Father Abraham. Abram is a pretty big deal in the Bible. A lot of people look back on Abram/Abraham. In fact, some of the giants of the faith reference Abram. You think about King David. King David comes from the line of Abraham. He references Abram quite a bit, Abraham. You've got Elijah. He was dedicated to this guy, Abram or Abraham. You've got Elijah. Are you guys getting tired of me saying Abram/Abraham? Because I don't know what else to do about it. But Elijah is dedicated to Abram. There's this guy, Moses. You know Moses? He actually wrote Genesis, so he dedicates quite a bit of time to this guy named Abram. You've got people like Daniel, Joshua. They all talk about this guy, Abraham, which is pretty interesting. Last but not least, you go all the way to the New Testament, you see this guy, Paul, who used to be Saul. He dedicates a lot of time to this guy, Abraham. So there's something interesting about Abraham. Did you know that Abraham is the father of not just like what we would consider Jewish culture, but also he, through his son Ishmael, which we'll get to that later, was the line of Islam. And so every major religion actually goes back to Abram, if you want to study that some more, which is pretty interesting. Because of the promises that God makes to him, we get to see kind of how all of that plays out. So that is Abram. That's why we're going to spend the next 13 weeks studying this guy, Abram/Abraham. That, and because the next 13 weeks, the next 13 chapters is all on this guy. So that is this guy, Abram. And God makes some promises to Abram that we're going to dig into, which is why we called this series Promises. Now, how many of you guys have ever been promised something and it didn't work out? The promise was like, you backed out on your promise. Whatever that promise is, it could be something huge, it could be something small. We've all dealt with people not following through with a promise, right? Whether it's like, I promise that I'm going to bring you a shake home from McDonald's or something. I don't know why that just popped in my head. I don't know that that's ever happened, but I promise I'm going to bring home a shake, and then the person gets home and there's no shake. And it's like, what in the world? I thought you promised that I was going to have a shake, and now I'm angry, right? When promises get unfulfilled, we get really upset. That's never happened to me ever before. So just letting you know, don't talk to Leah about that later on. Like, why didn't you get him a shake? He works hard. No, don't do that. Now I'm in a hole, and I don't know what to do about that. So promises can be a very tricky thing. We've all dealt with promises, and because of the fact that we're all human beings, promises tend to lose kind of their luster a little bit. So that's why we have to add on to a promise. That's why we have to be like, okay, I pinky promise that this is going to happen, right? Let's pinky promise to make sure that this is a thing that's real. I've got to do that with my kids because I've promised them things and then it hasn't come true. So now it's like, now I got to up the ante some more and be like, okay, pinky promise, I swear, whatever that is. And what we've talked about before with in a series, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But we have a hard time with letting our yes be yes and our no be no, because we can be people pleasers, we can be worried about what people are going to think if we say no, if we say yes and then don't fulfill it. So it can be kind of a cluster. And thankfully, God is not that way. When God says that he's going to do something, God does it. We saw that in the first 11 chapters, and we're going to see it all throughout the rest of Genesis. So with that, let's open up our Bibles, and we're going to be in Genesis chapter 12 today. And we're going to take this just a little bit at a time, because that's how my brain worked with this chapter. So, Genesis 12, starting in verse 1. Now, the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." All right, first 3 verses here. God says to Abram, "I will." And he says it 5 times in the first 3 verses. So if you're someone who takes notes, if you have a Bible out, if you have the Bible app, I think you can highlight stuff on there. I would encourage you just to highlight, underline, whatever you got to do, whenever God says, "I will." It's going to be important. Okay? God is saying that he's going to give him some land. He says, I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will. I will. I will is a promise from God. I will is a promise. And like I said, we don't always take those into consideration when we hear the I will, right? The I will is almost like a little bit less than a promise. I mean, husbands probably know this a little bit. Like when you get asked to do something and the husband says, yeah, I will. It's not going to happen. This is probably not going to happen. The guy's like, I don't know. We forget, okay? We forget about stuff, and we forget what you told us to do. It's just, I'm just going to be honest with you ladies, okay? We get distracted by a lot of stuff, and we just forget. So anytime we say, as a husband, and I'm sure maybe in school for students, like, oh, yeah, did you do that homework? No, I will do that homework, though. And then we get stuck playing video games, we get stuck watching TV, we get stuck playing outside, and I will turns into I didn't, right? But with God, it turns into an I will, and he turns that into I did, every single time. So God makes all of these promises to Abram. And he says, I will. Now, here's kind of where I want to go with this just a little bit. Abram, we can think that he was called to God because he was a good guy, right? We kind of, I don't know if you thought this at all, but when I was a kid growing up, like you think about Father Abraham, he's a pretty cool dude. Like he knows a lot. He probably came from a really holy family. Abram didn't come from a holy family. Abram came from a family of idol worshipers. And so God saying, I will do all of these things, Abram had no merit for this whatsoever. Abram was not like plucked out of the crowd because he was an honor student. He wasn't plucked out of the culture because, wow, look at Abram. It doesn't say, because when we looked at the life of Noah, it said that Noah was found righteous before God. Noah was following God. It just randomly says, hey, Abram, you're the guy that I'm going to bless, and I'm going to make this whole nation out of you, and I'm going to do a whole work through you. Abram didn't have anything to bring to the table. Abram had nothing to bring to the table, except God told him to do it, and so he was like, I guess I'm moving. I guess I'm going somewhere. And so Abram did it. He was justified by faith, not by works. Anytime we look at Abram, if you look in, you can look this up later if you want to, in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, it goes through the whole book of the Hall of Faith, which we've talked about before. That all of these people who are commended by their faith, Abraham takes up a big chunk of that. And then Paul, remember I just talked about Paul, he wrote most of the New Testament, and he references Abraham as well. And he makes Abraham the point for why we are not justified by works, but justified by faith. There's an entire chapter, a few chapters, Galatians 3 through 5. If you want to write that down for your homework, we're not going to read it all today. But if you want homework, if you like I love to study and I love things and I love to read, go read Galatians 3 through 5. And you're going to find out a lot more about Paul's stance on grace alone as opposed to justified by works. And our issue is that we continually try to say that we're justified by works. We might not say it all the time, but that's the way in which we operate a lot of the times. It's like, ooh, I need to do this. I have to do this. If I don't do this, then maybe God's not going to like me that much. Maybe God's going to shun me for not doing this or not doing that. And we start to let this sink in a little bit of like, oh, maybe I'm justified by works. Well, if you're justified by works, then that makes a lot of sense that we have a lot of work to do. But if we're justified by faith alone, it changes the response. And now, out of a response of the faith that God has given to us, out of a response out of what God has done for us, we follow Christ. Out of a response to the gift that God has given to us, we do cool stuff in the community. We help each other out. We show up here because it's a response. It's not a responsibility, it's a response. Oh, that was pretty good. It's not a responsibility. I should have put that on the screen, but I just came up with it just now. So we're justified by faith, not by works. And this call, these first 3 verses, are proof of that. That Abram had no works to justify anything that God had called him to do. But God said, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do this for you. I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. Moving on, verse 4. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. I'm going to stop there. The first sentence, that first line, so Abram went. So Abram went. God said, I'm going to do these things for you. I will, I will, I will. I'm going to give you the faith to do it. I'm going to give you all this stuff. Now go. And Abram didn't say, I don't know. Maybe. I think God's telling me to do something. I think God's calling me to do something. I think God is telling me what I should go do. But I'm pretty happy here in Ur. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty satisfied. I think I'll stay here. No, it says, so Abram went. Immediately, Abram went. Actions follow faith. Actions follow faith. If you are someone who has faith this morning, whether you're watching online or you're here at the brewery, if you have faith in Christ, then actions need to follow that faith. You need to back up those words. That you say, I believe, you say you believe, then live your life like you believe. I need to live my life like I believe. God is patient. God's going to be patient with us. Abram was 75 years old before he went. Now, it's not entirely true what I said before, that Abram was just like immediately going. Okay, because in verses right before that, in the end of chapter 11, Abram started to go with his family and then stopped because they had a nice spot where they were at. And then God had to remind him again, hey, keep going. And so then Abram went out. If you want people to believe your I will statements, follow it up with action. If you want people to believe your and my I will statements, then we need to follow it up with action. Anytime we say I will, like I said before, anytime we say I will, I'm going to bring that shake home for you, I will do it, then we need to follow it up with action. See, if there is no action behind it, then the faith starts to lose, doesn't it? We start to lose that faith a little bit if there is no action. Think about this for a second. If you buy concert tickets, which you really can't right now because that is the suckiest thing ever, but the fact that okay, just pretend like it was 2018 and you're walking around just doing life, hanging out with all your friends, and just like you're hugging every single person that you see, and you're not worried about a single thing. And it's 2018. There's lots of concerts to go to. There's lots of cool stuff. You could even go into 2019 if you wanted to. And there's all you're going to New Year's Eve parties. You're doing big old celebrations. Am I painting the picture clear enough? Can you remember back that time? There was a time when we were able to do all this stuff. I don't know if you remember or not, but it was there. And maybe someday we'll get back to it. Who knows? But remember those moments. Okay, so now we're in that setting. We're in that setting of it's been, 3 years ago. And you get to go to a concert. And so you buy tickets to the concert. Now, you have faith in that transaction, right? That whoever you bought the tickets from, whether it was Ticketmaster with their $800 fees that go on top of a $20 ticket, or if you buy it off of StubHub, which is even more fees, or you just scalp it on the street, which is the best way to go, really, when you're buying concert tickets. So I would encourage that probably once we get back to normal. You get the tickets. You have faith that those tickets are valid, right? You have faith that those tickets are good. Now, if you go to the concert and you hand the ticket over and they say, come on in, your faith is validated. The action is validated. You have faith that the tickets are good. Now, if you brought the tickets up there and you're like, well, here's my ticket, and they're like, these are not real tickets. This just says one ticket. That's all it says. It doesn't even say who you're going to see. It just says one ticket. Then you're going to lose faith in the process, aren't you? You're going to lose faith in the person. You're going to lose faith in Ticketmaster. You're going to lose faith in whatever. So the I will statements are incredibly important. And for us, if we want people to believe what we say and believe what we do, then the I will statements are incredibly important if we follow it up with action. Actions follow faith. So Abram went. His actions followed his faith. Now the next phrase is even more important. As the Lord had told him. How often do we jump out of that plane without the parachute? Because we think it's time. As the Lord had told him. Abram went as the Lord had told him. We can do all of these things. We can think that we're doing the right things, but if we're not going the way that God has led us, then we're going the wrong way, and we're putting our faith in the wrong things. See, Abram went because God told him to go. So are we going because God has told us to go, or does it look shiny over there, or does it look new, or does it look more interesting over there, or over here, wherever it is that you find yourself going, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's whatever. See, we tend to do this. We tend to say, well, I'll go as I tell myself to go. That's more the same. Like, I'll go as I tell myself to go. You know what? That opportunity looks better for me. That position looks more worthwhile for me. That looks like it's a better place to go. I'm going to go over there. You know what? I don't really care about my family anymore. I'm just going to go do what I'm going to go do. See, that I went as I said I wanted to go. But if we go as the Lord calls us to go, well, then it changes the perspective a little bit. Then it's no longer about how much money you're going to make, how happy you're going to be, what the weather's going to be like there. It's more like, what is God calling me to go do, and should I go do that instead of what I want to do? Now, I'm not saying we can't enjoy the sunshine. I'm not saying we can't have happiness. I'm not saying we can't do all of these things. But when we put that as the paramount thing, instead of following Jesus, when we say, I will go, when we're putting faith in whatever material possessions we can find here on earth, well, then our faith is going to be lackluster. We're going to end up disappointed. But if God calls us to something, then we're going to feel fulfilled. It's going to lead to a life that's not necessarily easier. It's not necessarily better, but it's better at the end. When God calls us to something and we go, actions follow faith. So we get to go. Action follows faith. Now, when we go, we're going to slip up. We're going to mess up. That's inevitable. And so sometimes that prevents us from wanting to go again because we're like, I tried that before, and I didn't like it, and I fell, and it hurt. When I was in 7th grade, I ran track. Just 1 year. I didn't like it. Like I said before, running isn't my thing. But my brother was a pretty good sprinter, and he could do the high jump really well. So I looked up to my older brother, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go out for the track team. And I did, and anybody makes the track team, so you don't have to, try out for the track team. If you're not good, they just put you in the last heat or the first heat, and just you're in lane 8. I don't know, just run, I guess. What event do you want to do? It doesn't matter what event you want to do. Just do an event, whatever you want to do, right? Just don't bump the guy next to you, because that's illegal. Anyway, so I signed up to run track, and I got to do a relay. It was like a 4x100, so each of us got to run 100 meters. And, no, yards, not 100 meters, 100 yards. Wait, no, it's 100 meters. I don't know. Let's get beyond the details here. So we're running this race, and I'm the last leg, and it's like a co-ed thing. So guys run with girls and whatever. And I'm in 7th grade, hadn't really hit my growth spurts yet, or any of those things, and so I was still a young child, basically. And I don't know if you know this, but women hit their growth spurts and stuff a lot faster than boys do. They mature a lot faster than boys do. And so I was running against a girl, and she was faster than me. And I didn't want to get beat by a girl because I had pride for me, whatever that means. Sorry, ladies. I just was like, I don't want to get beat by a girl, so I got to run fast. And so I tried running as hard as I possibly could. And I wasn't very coordinated either. And so as I'm running as hard as I possibly can, I'm pushing as hard as I possibly can go. I'm just running at full tilt. And inevitably, my feet are too big. And so I tripped and fell down in front of people at a track meet, and it was embarrassing. And then the girl beat me, and so it didn't even matter what I tried, but I took a pretty good tumble. But at least I was running. I got up, I finished the race. I didn't get a medal, but at least I finished the race. And I think sometimes God's just like, can you at least just start the race? Can you at least just start running? I know you're going to fall a few times. I made you. I understand your failures. I know that what your faults are. Don't you think that I'm not going to pick you back up? I will be there for you, is what God says. Inevitably, we're going to fall down. If we're trying to run too hard, if we're doing too much, if we're looking at everybody else around us and trying to keep up with them, we're going to fall. And our buddy Abram has a similar fall. We're going to go down to verse 10. So he's moving all around. Abram is moving all around. He's trying to figure out where he wants to live. He goes to a place called Bethel. He builds an altar there, and then he moves on. He goes to a few different places. He builds a few altars. He goes to a place called Shechem, which is kind of interesting because there's a few other passages in Scripture that reference Shechem. He builds an altar in Shechem. Joshua is one of those guys who also builds an altar in Shechem, so you should check that out at some point. So anyway, Abram is on his journey. In this time, his father has passed away. Things are not super great for Abram. They're just, he's in a desert season, essentially. So on to verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. Sojourn means just to stay for a while, just to be there for a little bit. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarah, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. He was giving her a compliment. That's nice, right? Thanks, his wife said. His wife was like, oh, thank you so much. It's in there somewhere. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So I took her for my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. So Abram gets a little bit he gets a little bit concerned at this moment. Abram's like, I don't know what to do. We're in Egypt. He's having a crisis of faith. Abram is having a crisis of faith. And before we think that, we look bad on Abram, like I've read the story a million times, I'm like, Abram is such a fool. Why didn't he trust God more? Why didn't he just believe in the promises? God said he will, and he was going to, and he continued to provide. Why wouldn't he just stick with God? And it's like, well, you dummy, why don't you just look at your own life and ask yourself the same question? Why don't you stick with God when God says I will? See, Abram was having a pretty difficult time. There's a few things going on in Abram's life at this point. Number one, he was promised a child. He was promised that they were going to make a great nation out of Abram. That's what God promised him. He's 75 years old, getting closer to 90, and still no child. So he's got no child. That's a crisis of faith for Abram. He's like, I don't know if this is really going to work out. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. So he has a little bit of a crisis of faith there. He doesn't know where he's going. He's going to an unknown destination. Have you ever had to step out in faith or just like take a trip somewhere and you don't know where you're going? Maybe you were kidnapped or something and you didn't know where you were going. Just making sure you get put in the back of a trunk and you're like, I don't know where I'm going. You're going to an unknown destination? Ever happened? No? Okay, cool. That's good. You're going to an unknown destination. Abram has no idea where he's supposed to land. God told him to go, but God didn't tell him exactly where to go. Abram has no idea where he's going. So he's wandering around this area, not really sure where he's going. He left all of the people that he knew. Abram left most of his family. He should have left all of his family. We're going to find that out later. He left most of his family, and he decided that he was going to go, but he left everything he knew behind, all of the people he knew, all of his friends, his culture, and most of his family was left behind. How difficult that would be. I don't know if you guys have ever moved from one place to another without family, but it's like, man, what are we doing here? Like, we are literally all on our own. Have you ever, like, for those of you that have kids, like the first time you leave the hospital, like with the first kid, you're like, why are we stealing this baby? I don't know. What are we? They're letting us leave way too soon. Like, we need to spend another 2 weeks here so that the staff can take care of us. It's that feeling of like, okay, I guess it's all on us now. Abram has this feeling of like, I don't know where I'm going. We have no kids. And we're leaving my family. His dad had died, so that's another one. It says that in chapter 11, that his dad has died. And he couldn't find a place to live. Those are some of the verses that we skipped, that Abram couldn't find a place to live. He looked all over the place. He was in Bethel for a while. He was in Shechem for a while. He couldn't really find a place, so he just pitched his tent. He was like, I guess we're just going to stay here. He doesn't have a place to live. He doesn't know anyone. And the other crisis of faith here is that he didn't fit in with the locals. They're the Canaanites. They're pretty bad people at this point. The Canaanites were not great people, so he's in a land of people that he doesn't understand, a culture he doesn't understand. And so, yeah, his faith is hit a little bit right now. He's hurting a little bit right now. And then add on top of that, verse 10. Now there is a famine in the land. At this point, Abram is like, I want to give up. The plan of God is not a plan for me. I am tired. I'm exhausted. We've got no kids. We've got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off. Dumb and Dumber. Sorry, I do a lot of movie quotes, and you're just going to have to keep up, okay? Abram has he's hurting right now. Can anybody relate where it's just one thing after another, after another, after another, and you start to question, and you're like, where is God in all of this? If he's not going to take care of me, I'm going to take care of me. Can you relate? So that's what Abram does. God didn't tell him to go to Egypt, but Abram's like, there's a famine in the land, all of this stuff is happening, I'm going to do something for me, I'm going to take care of myself. So he goes to Egypt, and he starts scheming up this plan. And the issue, the statement that I want to make for this, I love this point, if I can boast, is don't man-plan God-sized problems. Don't man-plan God-sized problems. See, Abram started making a plan that did not involve God anywhere. He's like, I'm going to get out of this land. I know there's lots of food. There's lots of stuff in Egypt. It's looking pretty good there. We're going to have to maybe make a couple of lies to you, Sarah, just to cover our butts here, but I think it's going to work out okay. And he starts to man-plan a God-sized problem. God didn't tell him to go. He could have waited, but he didn't. See, his eyes were on the problem, not God. If you want to get your pens out or your highlighters, whatever you've got, I want you to underline a few more things. In the first 3 verses, 5 times in the first 3 verses, Abram says, they will. So 5 times in the first 3 verses of the chapter, God says, I will. 5 times in these next 3 verses, 10 through 12, Abram is so focused on the problems before him, all he can see is what they will do. And I think that is a cue for a lot of us. They will. And when the Egyptians see you, verse 12, they will say, this is his wife, then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of your sake, that my life may be spared. Do you see the focus starts to become so much more on the problem and what Abram needs to take care of for himself? He stops focusing on who God is and starts focusing more on the problem at hand. And so he decides that he's going to man plan this God-sized problem. His eyes are on the problem, not on God. And the problem with sin, when we get into sin, is it keeps adding to itself. So Abram goes, he defies what God has called him to do, and he says, like, I'm just going to go do this. And the problem is he gets himself in trouble. He thinks he's going to take care of stuff, but he finds himself in trouble, and sin keeps adding on to itself. He keeps lying, and then a lie it starts involving more people. So the first thing is Abram left. And then he says, oh, shoot, we've got to deal with this because my wife is pretty good looking. And so he says, yeah, I'm going to have to lie and say you're my sister. And now he's implicating his wife in this as well. So sin continues to grow. Now his wife is involved in this whole plan. He says, okay, I have to lie. Now I'm asking you to lie. And isn't this the way that sin always ends up, right? We start it, it's not going to hurt anyone else. It's not going to bother anyone else. It's not going to harm anyone. I'm just going to take care of whatever I need to take care of. I'm going to just twist the truth a little bit. Hey, actually, could you twist the truth with me? Just so we're all clear. This is who I am. This is how I am. So we need to keep this going, this lie going. All right. I'm your brother, you're my sister. Got it? And now they start, so Sarah lies, and now they're implicating Pharaoh in all of this sin. Now Pharaoh's stuck in all of this sin with Sarah and Abram. And then God's like, oh, all right, well, I got to take care of something here. God says, I'll step in. And God gives some plagues and stuff to Pharaoh. Not the first time it's going to happen, but maybe a foreshadowing of things to come when the Israelites leave Egypt. You get it? He sends some stuff that happens to Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh's like, why didn't you lied to me? So God has to intervene because Abram decided to man plan a God-sized problem, and we do the exact same thing. We do the exact same thing. The nice thing is that God continues to use us. We still win at the end, even though we fall, even though we trip up, even though we're going to fail. I'm going to fail, you're going to fail, we're all going to fail, we're all going to be failures, all right? It's going to happen. We're all going to be failures, but God uses our failures. God uses our struggles. I was reading up, I watch the Tigers whenever I can, and this last week, well, they're not doing so great, but this last week they played the White Sox, and they didn't do great there, but they won a game against the White Sox, and it wasn't pretty. The Tigers committed 5 errors in the game, and they still won the game somehow. 5 errors. Now I was like, well, isn't that the microcosm of life? Because we're committing error after error after error, and God says you're still going to win in the end if you follow me. God says you're still going to win. I know you're going to mess up. I know you're going to fail. You're going to botch that play. The ball's going to hit you right in the face. It's going to happen. You're going to get hurt, but you will win at the end. God's promises are I will, and they're true. We lean on his understanding. Verse 11 says that just 2 words. Abram says, I know. I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Abram starts thinking through on his own understanding. And if you want to turn with me to Proverbs, you might have learned this when you were a kid or something. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Abram started leaning on his own understanding. And God is saying, don't lean on your own understanding. Your own understanding is going to fail you. Your own ideas are going to fail you. Lean on his promises. Lean on God's I will for your life. And we're going to mess it up. We're going to screw it up. But if we keep leaning on his understanding, not the I know statements, but on his understanding, we can trust that God's plan overcomes God-sized problems. God's plan will overcome God-sized problems. And if we trust that, we trust those I wills, then the next thing for us to do is to get on with our journey. Get on with your journey. I don't know where you're at. I don't know what leg of the race you're on. But God's calling you to get on with your journey. See, the problem sometimes with us Christians, especially here in America, is we tend to just sit. We tend to just stay put. We tend to just keep getting fed the word, which is great, but then we don't do anything with it. And then we become bloated. And then we become larger. And we don't work out our faith. God's calling us to exercise our faith. And we get large on theology. We get large on all the things that we think other people should be doing. We get large on our own opinions of what we think God should be doing. And we get large on our own opinions on how the church should operate and how we should play into that role. And instead of actually going and being the church and actually going and serving the community and actually going and sharing the gospel with those around us, we just sit. Maybe we've gotten hurt in the past, and it's like, I messed up so bad last time. I swore when I was trying to share the gospel with that person, and I don't know if they're ever going to listen to me again. God's bigger than a swear word. God's bigger than whatever we can stumble into. God's plan is bigger. So get on with your journey. And guys, it's okay to fail. We're going to fail. I'm going to fail. Like I said, we're all just a room full of failures. And the sooner we can accept that, the sooner we can laugh about it, have humility about it, be open and transparent about it, and the sooner we can change. But get on with your journey. I don't know where you're at in your journey. But what's step one? How do you start? How do you get going? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for what you've done for us, God. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the fact that you give grace, and we don't deserve it. God, we love you for that. We love you for what you've done in our lives. God, I pray that we would have the faith, God, that our actions would follow our faith. God, would you help us get on our journey? Maybe this is the first time we're following you. I don't know. But God, I pray that we would be a people of action. That's in your precious name. In the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen.